This is Paul Sandeman with Business Success Tips, where you learn to have, you're going to sell, excuse me, one more time. This is Paul Sandeman with Business Success Tips, where you learn to make more money in less time and have more fun, which is the most important part. Okay, so I have Tom Piscitelli here from Selling Trust, I guess, selling training and coaching, right? And that's a mouthful.
That's correct.
Okay. So you're going to have to tell me how to sell trust. I guess that's the mission here. Now, tell me a little about your background. You work a lot with HVAC people. The audience here is mostly contractors. So that's who you're going to be talking to, mostly small contractors they're probably between $1 million and 10 million. So why should they listen to you?
Well, first of all, time gives us a lot of lessons that we learn from, as we all know. And so I've made a lot of mistakes along the way. I've invested almost 40 plus years in working with contractors of all sorts, residential and commercial HVAC contractors. And these contractors they could range from $500,000 a year all the way up to, I just met with one last night, one of my flagship success stories, and he just sold his business for $36 million.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, so they're all size, and residential, commercial, and some industrial. And the fundamentals of selling, I think, are consistent across all three of those business niches. Whether you're selling roofing or plumbing, doesn't really matter. There's some fundamentals that apply. And if we follow these guidelines, I think then success will follow it.
So have you actually been working in that business, or have you been a coach for this whole time?
I've been a coach for the whole time. My initial experience was with Honeywell. And back in the day, Honeywell hired people to actually go out and work with contractors directly. So for nearly 20 years in sales and sales management, I called on residential and light commercial contractors, and we made 20 to 30 calls a week. So you could do the math over 20 years.
A lot of
And
calls.
yeah,
Wait,
I
did you do
knew
these in
nothing.
person or you did them on the phone? I mean, obviously didn't have Zoom in
Oh
those
no,
days. So how did
yeah,
you,
this was in person.
okay. So you go out and you'd help Honeywell, wanted them to sell more stuff, obviously. That was their mission. And so you were the sales coach from Honeywell and to teach these guys how to sell more stuff from Honeywell. I'm assuming that was the job, right?
That was the job. And so they were Honeywell things, of course. And then what we ended up doing over time is we learned what the business of the business was like. And the business of the business was about helping the contractors be more profitable at the end of the day. And then we had to back into all the best practices that contractors would implement in order to create a better bottom line.
So obviously, Tom, if they sell more Honeywell stuff and they're losing money, they're not going to be happy, right?
Of course not. Yeah.
So I guess you inadvertently got into coaching because they may have sold stuff, but they don't have a profitable business. That's not going to help Honeywell stay in business, right? So
Right. Yeah. And it took me not a short amount of time to figure all this out. I mean, the first part of my career was with Honeywell, and then I left Honeywell and started, I worked for two wholesalers actually. So I
okay.
backed into the business to business market, and I worked for them and learned a lot in a very short period of time. But then after 4 years of working with distributors, I decided that I needed to hang my own shingle. And so in 1997, I set out. Two kids were in college and two more younger, and I still took the
You're
entrepreneurial
highly
leap.
motivated, I'm sure, had a big need, right? So
Yeah.
when you stepped into coaching, I'm just curious, how many businesses have you worked with? I imagine it's a significant amount.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's over 1,000. I'm sure over those years,
Wow.
maybe 3 or 4,000 actually.
I did the math once. I think I worked with 2,000 business. Sort of scary, right? So it's like all that time. So tell me, I guess as a coach, when you work with like say an HVAC business, what do you do? I mean, how do you come in? How do you tell them what to do, what not to do? What are some of the common things you find out that they need to do better about?
Sure. So I have a client right now that I'm going through this exact process with, and every single contractor client has a unique set of needs. So there's no sense in me coming in and trying to offer a universal program that could apply to all contractors. What is much more effective, of course, is finding out what their challenges are and then creating resources and programs and tools and things like that that can help them take care of the most important things that are addressing them. And I have a quick story to illustrate my
Okay.
approach. And a friend of mine, his name is Ron Smith, who's a legendary guy in the heating and air conditioning business, shared this story with me. And it starts with his pastor at church, and his pastor was a lexicographer, which I had to look up, and that means,
What
of
is that?
course,
I don't know what that is. Help me out here.
that's a person who studies the origin of words.
Okay.
And so the message for this particular Sunday was the word priority. And the word priority, in its original Latin form, had a militaristic definition, and that was the one thing that we needed to do in order to win the battle. So,
Okay.
in its original form, the word priority was singular. And over time, the word priority has become diluted to priorities. And
Right.
most of us will have a list of things that we want to accomplish for a day or a week. And then we'll look at that list. And if one of them might only take 15 minutes and the other three or four are going to take a lot more time, most of us would go ahead and check off the one, get the one done that would
We
take
get the
15
same
minutes.
emotional, gratification out of emptying the trash can as of an annual business plan, right? One's a lot easier.
Yeah, there you go. And so you get the rest of the message, which is if number one priority is the most important thing, then we focus on it. And if we only have 15 minutes, we grind away at it for 15 minutes. And otherwise, number one will always remain number one on the list because we don't focus on
Right.
it.
So
So,
how is that, again, story, how does that work in a business? Give me an example.
sure. So this particular client has a problem with their install department, and the number of callbacks that the installers have are heinous. They're driving up. It is just basically destroying their net profitability.
Okay.
And so then the next step is to get them to agree to focus on that one thing. And then yesterday we sliced the callbacks into separate pieces. So what causes the callbacks? And they determined that there were actually 5 separate things that caused the callbacks. And then we created an action plan to focus on the most important one first.
Okay. So I love that idea of priorities. So you're like contracts and this, how do they identify that one thing? They're going to, well, I need to sell more stuff. I can't find good employees. I don't understand, my profitability. I can't understand my construction software. It's all over the map, right? I'm not a good businessman. They're saying I obviously need to have a marketing plan. I don't have one of those. I need I need a budget. I haven't got a budget. I need some kind of SOP, standard operating procedure. I don't have those either. And it's like small businesses usually don't have any of that stuff, right? So with all that stuff, like I need all this. Where do I start? What's my priority?
Right. So it really it has to come from a discovery process that they use with the principals of the company. So at the highest level of management that you can be working with, you ask them those hard questions and you just don't let them off the hook until you actually get down to the real reason why they're not as effective as they want to be. It just I can't be more specific than that. It's unique for every single client I've ever worked with.
But is it how can it be one thing? I think, well, I need to sell the stuff, I need to deliver it and put it in, I need to collect the money, and I need to do it in a profitable way. That all businesses do that, right? So the question is, how do I define, what questions do I ask in order to identify that one thing that I need to change that'll make all the difference?
So it would be not just the one thing, Paul, but it would be the most important thing that is creating the challenge that we're dealing with. What is the most important thing that's in the way of creating the result that we want? You listed several of them very accurately. It's having a process, it's marketing, it's certainly sales in my world most of the time, but all these things are connected. Every single thing. So if you don't have a lead, you don't have a lead, then you're never going to make a sale. So the first step could be arguably to create a lead so you can produce a sale. And if you are not effective at the kitchen table selling, or with your client selling, then you're never going to produce anything anyway. And so then the next thing is, we not just need to make a sale, we need to make a profitable sale. And then it weaves its way into every single aspect of doing business. But you have to pick the one thing first.
The one thing.
Yeah. So, what's in the way?
Give me some examples. You've worked with a ton of companies of the one thing that you discovered and how you may have handled it.
Okay. So this contractor who just sold his business for more than $30 million. When I first met him, this company, he was actually not an employee yet. The owner of the company had a $3.5 million business, and they were not profitable. And so they were not profitable because they had no processes. They didn't keep good financials. They didn't know what they should sell it for. The salespeople were allowed to discount pricing at whim, and on and on. And so the person who came into the company, this person I'm referring to, who turned it around, came from an accounting background, and he was organized, and he knew the importance of financials. And so he started at a relatively low level in the organization. He started creating processes, organizing things. First of all, looking at the financials and determining where the biggest leaks in the money came from. And so from that, over the next 3 or 4 years, we started defining what it is the requirements were, documenting the requirements.
So was that one thing, financial understanding of it? What was that one thing in his business?
The first thing were the financials. They had no idea what their costs were They had random vendor relationships. People could vendors could drop off things. There was no control in pricing, costing, none of that. And so then we determined what the processes should be. We documented them. Then we trained people on what the processes were, and then we held them accountable and we measured what the results should be. So then we could give feedback to the people who were performing. If the performance was extraordinary, they got a reward. If it was not extraordinary and there was an opportunity for improvement, then we provided coaching to get their performance up. Because we had the measurements, we knew what it was. And if, God forbid, the team member wasn't able to contribute because he just wasn't the right fit, then finally we'd replace them. But that was a distant part of the process. We looked for people who could be, we wanted people to feel like they had an environment they could contribute to and be successful with.
Okay, so I ask my clients, simple question: did you make or lose money this week, and why? Right, it's a simple question. That's something that Costco could tell you every 2 hours. PepsiCo at Taco Bell's can tell you every 3 hours what their labor costs are.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess for a contractual business, you got to know your numbers, how much job costing are, what your flavor is. So I guess knowing those numbers of how whether you're making, losing money, and why was the one thing, right? Would that make sense? That one thing they didn't know?
That would be a primary thing. I would agree. And if the business is failing, like this client I'm referring to back in the day at $3.5 million, they were losing money. The most important thing actually first was to increase the top line. So they had a good salesperson and they had a good relationship with the equipment they were selling, and so it was easiest and the quickest remedy to sell more, so that we could start to have the time to look at the financials and plug the holes.
So basically, creating more gross profit was the one thing we had to sell, right? Had to fix, right?
Creating any kind of profit,
any profit, like I guess
in that company. Yeah, that was correct. Yes.
Okay. So give me another example, like contractors. Again, I think identifying that one, maybe thinking of another company, remodeler, contractor, an HVAC person who had a different one thing they had to fix. Because I think it's important that people identify that. But if they're listening to this podcast, I'm sure they're saying, well, what's my one thing? How do I know which my one thing is? Obviously calling you would help, but how do they do it on their own?
Yeah. So I'll spin off to sales then, because that's my relative area of expertise. And so selling commercially, selling industrially, residentially, it's all the same. And so if there are three components, three things that I feel we want to be mindful, and three things we have to offer. First is, if we don't establish trust, thus the name of my business, Selling with Trust, if we don't establish trust with the customer, then nothing is going to happen. If they don't feel comfortable or confident with you, they're not going to buy. Second is, we want to
let's back up. Okay, let's be specific. How do you establish trust? Whether when you walk in the door, you got to meet this person, right? And all contractors have one thing in common, unless they're huge, and that is they've got to get somebody who makes a decision to trust them. It could be the head of a supermarket chain, or it could just be a housewife and a husband in a small kitchen remodel. But you still got to figure out, how do you get them to trust you? So how do you do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so the first step, I think, in my belief, is that we have to have intention to help the customer be successful in their terms. So if we sell something to somebody and our only intention is to make the sale, then the nonverbal communication that occurs between salesperson and customer is going to be apparent. Only, you know this, only 7% of total communication is verbal, 93% is nonverbal, and that comes from facial expressions, body language. People read all this, and the single biggest one is tone of voice. So if our intention is to just make the sale, customer is going to figure that out.
So what you're saying
And
is you have to change the intention in your mind. I when I coach people, I go, you always have to put the customer's needs ahead of your own, so that their interest and not yours. But
yeah,
you have to have that, I guess, in your mind when you walk in the door, not how am I going to make the sale or how am I going to close the deal? It's like, what's in their best interest, right? Find that out.
mm-hmm. So Stephen Covey, you know, wrote 7 Habits of Highly
Right.
Effective People. And so I would take a bit out of his page and say that if we start with the end in mind, which was a Covey thing,
Right.
begin with the end in mind,
Right.
then our intention is to create a long-term client relationship. So not customer, but client, and client implies that it does have a relationship to it. So we want a long-term client relationship, and in heating and air conditioning, that can last for decades, right? So if I make a sale today for $15,000 in replacing their heating and air conditioning system, then that begins the long-term relationship and with the revenue stream, where there will be some maintenance revenue, there'll be some eventual service revenue, there'll be another replacement revenue, and then 2 or 3 times that can happen. So the potential in present dollars in a residential sales situation for heating and air conditioning is not just the $15,000, it's $50,000 or $100,000 long-term revenue stream if we do
So
the right things.
how do we help a person's walking in the front door? And I was talking to another coaching guy I was interviewing, and he said, well, he had a water, I guess it was a plumbing company built 250 million. He said, if somebody has to replace their water heater and you come out, they call you and do a good job and you leave, he says you're screwed. Because you've just replaced their water heater and you're a tool, right? So
Right.
how do you change from being a tool to being a friend? How do you make that relationship happen? What do you physically do? You got the guy coming out. How does he make that happen?
Right. So there are 3 ways. First, it's vital, in my opinion, to find out what the customer's needs and wants are. And there are 3 ways that we can do that. We can ask questions, then we can engage the customer in the discovery of their problems by also having them walk around the house with us to look at things. In heating and air conditioning, you might go into a child's bedroom and see a portable air filter. The filter's there for some reason, so there's
Right.
a need, right? And then the third part in heating and air conditioning and in plumbing and all contracting is to take some measurements. So we just don't want to guess on what the needs are. We're going to ask questions. We're going to look for clues by engaging the customer in this process, and we're going to take some measurements that are appropriate.
Well,
And
what kind of
that
measurements
process,
do you take? I mean, give me an example. I mean, I know
sure.
I'm thinking, when you buy a drill, you want a hole, right? That's the, thing. So I'm thinking when you buy air conditioning, nobody wants a big air conditioning. They just want to be comfortable, right? They want they want to feel good about being in their house and be comfortable in the room. So how do you measure that? Let's just say the only reason I'm ever air conditioning is because I don't want to be hot or I don't want to be cold. I want to be comfortable,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
So how do I measure that?
Yeah. So there are a lot of things, and one of them, most common response would be doing what's called a load calculation. So the salesperson would actually measure the house. And there are techniques for doing this. So you actually get a tape measure out, or you get a digital tape measure, and you measure the square footage in the windows, and you do all this stuff, and then you put it into a big calculator, and it tells you precisely the amount of air conditioning and heating that you need.
Now, you
And
can't get whether you're in the Sahara, I mean, whether you're in like Palm Desert or in Chicago or San Francisco, right? Because the climate's got to make a difference, right?
100%, absolutely. I have a client in Fort Lauderdale right now whose requirements are 100% different. They're the opposite of the spectrum to Seattle.
Right.
We barely have any air conditioning requirement in Seattle, and they have 11.9 months of air conditioning requirement in Fort Lauderdale.
Okay. So somehow you measure all this stuff, right? And again, how do you take, okay, you have 70 cubic feet, you need so many, BTUs or whatever to make this all work, and your air conditioning's, too small or whatever. I'm coming up with a number and saying, okay, you need twice the capacity of air conditioning you've got, or whatever the number is, right? How do you convert that into a long-term relationship?
So you do it with engagement. Engagement means, I'll contrast it. So heating and air conditioning guy or gal goes to the house and knocks on the door. Customer opens the door, has a phone in his ear, and he's busy talking on a conference call. And then he points around to the gate, or to the garage, and said the outdoor unit's over there or the furnace is over there. And so then the salesperson dutifully walks around to the equipment. And what they're doing is relegating themselves to have a relationship with the furnace
I guess
or the
that's
air
true.
conditioner.
Right. So what happens is they get to know the fan really well, but that's not going to that doesn't write a check, right?
What's the point of that? I mean, there's no point. And what ends up happening then, Paul, is that they end up giving the customer what I call a bid, a quote, or an estimate. And we all know that bid means beat idiot's deal,
Right.
and quote and estimate are just numbers, right? So I'll give the customer a bid, quote, or estimate, which is a price, and there is zero added value. Nothing. I haven't differentiated myself. I haven't differentiated my company, and I certainly haven't differentiated what I offer to the customer, because they're just getting model numbers and
They say, you need your whatever pump replaced and the new fan, and that's going to cost you, $5,000. Let us know if you want to do it, right?
that's exactly, you have it pegged 100%. And so the relationship, this approach with discovery, for me, in an hour and a half sales call, which would be truncated, it would be pretty precise to get it into 90 minutes. And that would mean that the first 45 minutes is what I call approach with discovery. And that is the meet and greet, knocking on the door, the meet and greet, confirming why we're there, setting the stage for the call, setting the expectations for the customer engagement, then inviting them to walk through the house so that there can be mutual discovery of the problems, finally going to the equipment with the customer in an ideal situation, taking some measurements, measuring static pressure, for example, looking at the blower wheel that's dirty, looking at the evaporator coil in the air conditioner that's all clogged up.
Right.
And so these things, if you don't do those, you're letting your customer down because you have not discovered what the cause of the problems are. And if we haven't done that, then we're not fulfilling the expectations that they have of us, that we have their back.
Well, where does that expectation come from? Because a lot of people call the HVAC guy or the water heater guy, just fix the heater and get out of here. We're done. Like the sooner you get out of, the happier I'm going to be.
Well, that's the mindset, 100%. And I have a cartoon that I always show with a homeowner opening the door, and outside are 5 contractors lined up, and the homeowner is just shouting next,
Right.
and so that's the mindset that people have. So that mindset is the very first thing we have to neutralize.
How
And
do
if
we
we
how do we change that? I mean, how do we change? I called you to come in and fix my water heater or change my thing or remodel my kitchen, whatever the heck it is. Just how much it's going to cost me, how fast it's going to get done, and how much you're going to mess up my life and my paycheck or my checkbook and pulling it off.
Right. So we do it with questions, right? And the technique that I love to coach is around asking questions you already know the answer to.
The
The
rhetorical question, right? Or not?
Yes, yeah. So um, you can't control what the customer's thinking is going to be. You can't control what their thinking is going to be, but you can influence what they think about by asking a question. So
I
what
imagine
most
you
sales
need to script this, right? Because I can't picture John Doe contractor or AB, the guy coming in who's selling remodels. He just sort of shows up and wings it, right? He's been doing this for 5 years or 10 years. Comes in, how do you doing, ma'am, or whatever, says, what are you looking for? And they have some kind of it obviously working for them because they're still in business. If it hadn't, they'd be out of business, right? You can pay a business as long as you're paid for mistakes. So working enough for them to survive. But how do you develop a script that works for these guys?
Well, I write a lot of scripts. I do, and I could forward one to you, but we don't have time for that. But so my scripts include setting the stage with, let's say that we're going to set the stage for the first part, which is right prior to the meet and greet. And prior to the meet and greet, we want to make sure that an email was sent to the customer confirming the reason for the call, and that email included what the expectations are for customer engagement and what the process will be and what the time expectation will be for this call. So if and the customer may or may not read that, but at least we took a shot,
Right.
right? So we confirmed all that, and then during the meet and greet, so the first part of the script would be knock on the door. Hi, I'm Tom, and I have a photo ID. I have my company logoed shirt, and I have my shoe covers in my hand, and I wait to be invited in, and I script all of this in that level of detail. And then I wait for the customer to invite me in, and then they invite me in. I put on my shoe covers before I walk in the door, and I close the door. We make sure the customer's not infringed on with that space, and then we start out. So I understand I'm here today. Oh no, we do an icebreaker first. Beautiful weather, whatever, icebreaker comment, neutral thing. And then we start out with, I understand I'm here today to talk about this. Is that correct? Sometimes it's not correct.
Okay. So you've been doing this so long, Tom. Is there the standard script, or do you have to make that script specific to the contractor, whether he's selling a remodel or he's selling air conditioning or whatever he's doing. He's coming into the client's home and hopefully leaving with either, a contract, an agreement to meet again, or something that moves the sale forward if he or she wants to make it. So is like one size fits all, or every script for every different company? You've done a lot of these. How do they happen?
Yeah. So the most effective ones are the latter. So they're customized to meet the situation. And remember, I think I commented earlier that one of the needs for a contractor, I feel, is to have a sales process, a documented sales process. And so that documented sales process would work back into this scripting that would fit the process that this particular contractor has elected, the principals have elected to
Okay, so
use.
let's short this. So what is the difference in sales that I can expect between having a script and not? Is it 10% having a script and not having a script? Because my guess is most people listening to this podcast do not have a script, just guessing. And
Sure.
so why would I want to write a script? What's the difference? What impacts does it have on my business? You've got a lot of statistics, I'm sure, you've been doing this for a long time.
Yeah. So a very effective, we call them comfort advisors in residential heating and air conditioning. A very effective comfort advisor might sell $1.5 million to $2 million a year.
Okay.
And that spins the wheel for the contractor. They'd love to have 4 or 5 of those.
Right.
My son happens to work for a company in Massachusetts, suburb of Boston, and they have a highly effective sales culture in that company, and the sales manager focuses everything toward helping the salespeople become more effective, and he sells $5 million a year.
Whoa. So
So
what you're saying is the difference between a script and no script, whether you're selling a remodel or an air conditioner or a paint job, you're somehow selling some kind of home improvement. Your experience, I'm just taking it out of the air here, between a script and no script can actually double your sales?
Well, I won't say that the scripting is the only thing, but it the sales process.
Okay, I'll say the difference between having a sales process, which includes a script,
Yes.
and not having one, and just showing up and doing your thing, can increase to like 100%. I'm sure you've seen something like that. Is that true?
Yeah, it's. I would say that would be, in the best case, that would be true.
So even if it's 50%. And the good news is that all goes to the bottom line. I don't know if they understand that, but it's huge because your fixed costs don't change. So
right.
As I see it, if this, let's say the average guy, I'm just going to prove something, is going to produce, I'm picking a number, 50,000 net a year to the company. I'm just picking a number to this guy, right? Mm-hmm. That without having a trainer, and you're saying what you could do for someone or somebody that like you that could develop a script and a sales process, it's going to go from 50,000 to 75 or 100,000, right? So doing the numbers, I'm just in my head here. Let's say it's 20, be conservative, 25,000. So he comes up 50% from where it was. So instead of 50,000, he sells 75,000. Project that over, 10 years or something. That's $250,000. So let's say all the sales training, all that kind of stuff costs, I'm picking a number, $10,000, whatever it is, right? So the ROI on that is amazing. It's like 1,000%. It's insane, right?
It is. It is. And your numbers are not that far out of line, I don't think. And so in a residential heating and air conditioning contractor, the profitability of them as a rule is somewhere around 5%, maybe.
Okay.
The most effective ones are double that to triple that. So
Wow.
a 15% net, and that's after the owner gets paid generously.
Right.
is realistic. So to your point, you could do the math on that, and that would be much greater than actually what you were mentioning here a moment ago.
It's insane. So, well, I'm gonna, we're running out of time here, but very quickly. So let's come up with the three things. Meet a guy at a bar, an airport, whatever, and you got to go. I'm a sales trainer. You're a contractor. What are the three things you're going to tell him before he gets on the plane? They're going to make a difference in his company because he's never going to see you again.
Yeah. So I'll give you six if I can, real
Okay. You can give
quickly.
me six. That's great. We got time. Six.
All right. So the most important characteristic of the most effective salespeople is they first and foremost are comfortable and confident asking for the sale.
Okay.
Number two, the next thing would be, as we discussed, engage the customer in the discovery of their problems. So that engagement piece. Number three, offer your customer choices. If I just bid, quote, or estimate one system, then they can say yes or no. If I offer choices, and this has been studied for a long
The
time,
alternative choice close. You know what I mean? Your
the
place or mine.
alternative choice close. So yeah, actually, and that's going to lead into the next one, which is alternative choice financing close. So I have four ways we can invest. You could have the low monthly investment, the total investment. We have 0%, same as cash. And we also have Visa, MasterCard. Which of those choices would you prefer? Is a nice one. And then this is where the ball gets dropped. And that's following up on every single opportunity that you've had. Every single time you visit the home or the building, follow up until the customer says yes or no. It's
Okay.
not offensive, and you'll earn the respect. And I can't tell you how many times personally in my consulting training business that I have called people after 5 or 6 or more times, and they say, "Oh, you know what? I'm so sorry I didn't get back to you. I do want to go
Well, I
ahead
think
and
there's some
get this done."
statistic that most people close on the fourth time people close, fifth or something. It's way down there.
It
It's not
is,
the first
it
one.
is, yeah, it is the fifth. And then the last thing, number 6, is sell to the way the customer wants to decide. And this has to do with the behavioral DISC assessment, if you're acquainted with DISC.
Yeah.
So you find out what process the customer is going to engage in. And if they're the customer that's on the phone at the doorstep and they're not going to pay attention to you, that tells you that you're going to have to sell to them differently than the one who's sitting on the bucket in the basement and taking notes about everything that you're saying.
Right. Okay, cool. Well, this has been very informative, Tom. Now, if somebody wants to work with you, how do they contact you and and you begin an engagement with somebody, do you do the first one for free? Or I mean, how do they get to know whether you're the right guy to help them improve their sales?
Sure. And so on my website, there is a form that you can complete. I think it's on pretty much every page of the website, a request for consultation, and just complete that and send it to me. And I don't really watch my watch. If I can help you, this is a way for me to get back to the industry, and I really like helping our coworkers and our contractors. So we'll do that, or they can alternatively just email me at tom@sellingtrust.com, tom@sellingtrust.com.
Great. I love that name. Okay. Well, thank you, Tom. I appreciate being here. And also, I have to say, be sure to subscribe. My kid always does that to this podcast, right? It's what I'm supposed to do.
Great.
So thanks again. And I think you should call Tom because you look at the ROI. I mean, you're literally leaving hundreds of thousands of dollars on the table by not making this kind of decision. It's a huge number. So I think you should give him a call. Thanks, Tom. I really appreciate your time.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you very much.